Warner Brothers and DC Studios is getting ready to release Supergirl in a few weeks at the box office, starring House of the Dragon's Milly Alcock as the titular character. Some fans out there are very excited by this, while seemingly, well, most folks aren't. But in one of the more curious cases of box office bizarreness, we get this today that has been going all over social media. Supergirl reportedly has a budget of $175 million and needs $315 million worldwide to break even. No. 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 Renegade Online. Woo, the litany. This is going to be a good one, kids. The absolute litany of, let's just say, a joyous ignorance out there on X today over this deadline report. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to make it very clear up front. You guys know the tremendous level of respect that I have for Anthony D'Alessandro, who covers the box office, reporting at Deadline magazine. This guy knows his numbers and his math out there usually quite well, at least in terms of the information that he gets in reports. So let's go through the litany, the absolute bizarre, the litany of these kind of things today, because this seems to stem from a Deadline report that I think is, we're all going to find out almost 100% is a bit of an error in the way it was written. Typos and mistakes happen to the best of people, but I think there is some key information there that I think maybe we're glossing over. We'll get to that in a minute. But we see this here. Supergirl reportedly has a budget of $175, needs $315 million worldwide to break even. Now, if you've listened to this channel for any amount of time, one of the hallmarks that we've had over the years was actually bringing some distinct clarity to how the box office works and how the real movie math, as it were, actually functions. We have covered public earnings reports from all of the major Hollywood studios, from Disney to Warner Brothers to Paramount, so on and so forth. And we have even covered the financial reporting from theatrical exhibition, places like Cinemark and Regal, and yes, AMC theaters, the largest kid on the block. So we know with absolute certainty what these theaters are, on average, returning to theatrical distribution. That is to say, the studios like Warner Brothers in this case. It is domestically around 50%. And on average, you've got an international take-back, excluding China, of closer to, and even under in many cases, 40%. So how on earth could we look at this even if we momentarily ignore what is going to be a rather sizable marketing budget, I believe, that is going to be similar to what we just saw for Star Wars, Mandalorian, and Grogu? We all know how that turned out. Another video will follow up on that. But you've got Supergirl now coming in at $175 million. No wherewithal here to global marketing, and somehow $175 million needs $315 million worldwide to break even.
Oh, you are bad at math.
Well, that math obviously don't math. Even if 100% of all the ticket sales for Supergirl were to somehow come just from North America, where they might get as much as 52 to 55% of the ticket sales, again, that math still don't really math.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
But if we want to assume the movie does $315 million and does nothing internationally out of that, then okay. But we still get the Gunno shills out there like this. $315 million is the magic number. Show up, DC fans. Guess what, guys? I've got bad news for you, because Supergirl probably isn't going to do a penny more than Mandalorian and Grogu. Yeah. In fact, according to the latest tracking estimates from Sean Robbins at Box Office Theory, published on Friday, May 29th, just a few days ago, Supergirl looks like on the low end it might only pull in around $47 million, and on the high end $65 million of its three-day opening weekend. So when I said it's going to do about as well as Star Wars, Mandalorian, and Grogu, I meant it's probably going to do worse. It's probably going to do a lot worse. I'm sorry. Now, of course, this movie could leg out. It could have better word of mouth than Mando and Grogu, and then overperform its opening weekend in a fashion that would be uncommon to what we just saw with the latest little green dude from the former Kathleen Kennedy studio. But that is a time will tell issue. As of right now, we don't know. But let's talk about what this movie actually needs to make, because this $315 million figure is complete bullshit. All of the online social media posts referencing this mysterious $315 million retail break-even figure all harken back to this particular Deadline article. So let's take a look. Supergirl advance tickets go on sale before DC picks June 26th opening. By the way, there were even folks out there on social media, the same ones giddy over this ridiculous $315 million figure, suggesting that AMC's ticket sales site broke down and crashed over people running to get Supergirl tickets. Sure.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Here, however, is the magic sentence. And again, this is an article that was written by Anthony D'Alessandro, a guy who is very, very good at his job. I think he's one of the best box office journalists out there. But sometimes things go wrong. I have a feeling this is going to get corrected. But let me explain. Supergirl, we hear, says D'Alessandro, cost $175 million net before global P&A spend. All right, let's break that first part out, because people out there are also confused, bringing up the whole, well, tax credits, my tax credits, they don't get the tax credits. There's a couple of things right there, Junior. Hang tight. See that word net in there? $175 million net before global P&A. That means the film tax credits have already been factored in to that 175, meaning the actual production cost, the gross cost of production for Supergirl was actually much higher. If I had to guess, probably somewhere in the vicinity of $200 to $225 million. Also, about a previous video I did regarding Mandalorian and Grogu, where I pointed out that the $165 million reported production budget for that was from California. And California has a different reporting system than, say, the United Kingdom. See, in California, what you report, as they say themselves, are the qualified expenses, meaning the below-the-line expenses that don't include your writers, your directors, your producers, your entire cast that acts in front of the camera. Big costs. In fact, the biggest singular costs in a production like that as far as personnel goes. However, in the United Kingdom wants you to report everything in there and then break out what are qualified versus non-qualified, and then they pay their film tax credit based on the qualified expenses that exist and occur inside the UK. So, for example, if you filmed half the movie in Ohio and the other half the movie in Great Britain, Britain is not going to pay you film tax credits on what you did in Cleveland, but they want you to report it nonetheless. So let's take this $175 million net, as in after the film tax credits were received, cost of the production of Supergirl. Then we have to go to the next piece, which says before global prints and ads, which is the older lingo for marketing, right? Prints, meaning when you actually had to physically print copies, massive reels of film to then distribute around the globe, and then all of the advertising costs that went with it. Today, it's more akin to just the advertising, although there is definitely some distribution costs, as they simply don't drop these movies on a Google Drive for theaters to download. And that global prints and ads, or that global marketing cost, as I mentioned earlier, is probably on par with something like The Mandalorian and Grogu, which I estimated to be around $130 million. Companies like Disney and Warner Brothers do not ever cheap out on major IPs unless they have some serious concerns well in advance. Rumor has it they did cut the marketing budget back a few years ago when it came to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, although we're not talking about chicken scratch. We were still talking about a marketing spend that was about $100 million. In 2026, don't forget, kids, we had $10 million Super Bowl commercials for one ad. The cost of advertising across the board, both in traditional linear media, streaming or AVOD or SVOD, and yes, even online with things like YouTube ads, Google ads, Yahoo ads, whatever the heck is the case out there. Yeah, those things have all gotten much more expensive. And a major piece of core IP for Warner Brothers is undoubtedly DC. and they are not going to cheap out on something like Supergirl. So if we go back to this, that would tell me that the all-in cost is probably somewhere around 300 or a little over $300 million. As people have correctly pointed out, how is it that we needed $600 million, according to Disney sources that spoke to That Hollywood Reporter? And then this is $10 million more expensive, and it needs half of what Mando does. It doesn't make sense, does it? That's right. It's not supposed to make sense because it's not real. Break even at $315 dollars. He doesn't even have an M in there. So $315. No, I know what you meant, Anthony. $315 million at the global box office. That number is a huge problem. Even if we were to double just the $175 million without a shred given towards marketing and figure 50% on that as far as the retail box office, that means you need about $350 million at the global box office to yield back $175. But that makes no difference towards where is the marketing cost, which is probably another $125 to $140 million, somewhere thereabout. It's just been forgotten. Except right here, Anthony D'Alessandro specifically says it's $175 million net before the global P&A spend. And Anthony D'Alessandro is not an idiot. And I don't think he's trying to lie to people either. This is what I think might be the case. Now, I hope D'Alessandro clears this up in the coming days and weeks, and I suspect that he probably will. He doesn't want this one hanging over his head because he doesn't get stuff like this wrong. The $315 million break-even sounds more like what the net break-even is, meaning $315 million is what the studio needs to get back to recover not only its production, but also its marketing costs as well. That number I can 100% believe and would say that's kind of right in line with what I would mathematically map out. Between 300 and 320 million, give or take a bit here, right? 315 million net back to the studio makes a lot of sense, which in that case means about $630 million at the global box office. And again, what did Mandalorian and Grogu need to break even? About $600 million. They spent about $10 million more, allegedly, on this movie, although we did have our doubts about the stated net budget of Mandalorian and Grogu. Go check out a previous video on that one. But even still, all things being equal, then you would expect that this movie would need, in this case, another 20 to 30 million, on top of what Mando and Grogu would have needed. And there's the number, $630 million with $315 million net back to Warner Brothers to cover the entire cost floor, production, and marketing. But again, the problem is, as of right now, just about 3 weeks before this movie is set to open, it's not going to get anywhere near that. Granted, it's still early, and these numbers can certainly change. They can stay the same. They can get bigger. They can get worse. But as of right now, let's say the domestic opening airs towards the higher end of Sean's estimates as of May 29th, about a month before the movie comes out. Hangs at around $65 million on the high side, and then magically legs out to 3x at $181 million. Multiply that by 2 to add on the international side of things. I don't see Supergirl performing radically more in the international market than it does in the domestic. That would put the final run somewhere south of $400 million, between $350 and $400 million. Very similar to The Mandalorian and Grogu. And again, that's if this movie actually manages to go 3x out from its start point, which quite frankly, I can't see happening, short of this being treated as one of the best superhero movies in an age. So do mind the exuberance and the misplaced euphoria from some of the DC stands out there online. I can't really blame them for this one. This was an error by Deadline that is now going to get repeated until we all throw up from it. And there's nothing you can do to tell these people that it's just flat wrong. But it is. Have a good one. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.